Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her formal diplomatic robes as the massive doors of the imperial throne chamber slowly opened. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall like thunder, and she could feel the weight of 10,000 eyes upon her. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the tiered seats that rose like cliffs on either side of the golden walkway, leading to the throne of stars. She had come here with hope. 3 months of careful negotiations had led to this moment, where humanity might finally join the Galactic Empire as equals, rather than the primitive species they were labeled as. The humans had discovered faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago, making them babies in galactic terms. Most species had been traveling the stars for millennia. The Zephyrian Emperor Kajitar dominated the far end of the hall, his crystalline form catching and reflecting the light from 1,000 floating orbs. His species had ruled the galaxy for over 2,000 years, and their empire stretched across 47 star systems. They were ancient, powerful, and utterly convinced of their superiority over all other life forms. Sarah's footsteps rang out against the polished stone as she made her way forward. Behind her walked her small entourage of human diplomats and guards, their presence barely noticed in this sea of alien nobility. She carried with her the hopes of 12 billion humans across 6 colony worlds, all waiting to hear whether they would be accepted into galactic civilization or remain isolated on the outer rim. The negotiations had gone well, or so she thought. The Empire seemed genuinely interested in human technology, particularly their advances in quantum computing and medical nanobots. Humans had a gift for innovation that impressed even the ancient races. They had developed solutions to problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries, all within their brief time among the stars. As she approached the base of the throne, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something was wrong. The usual murmur of conversation that filled such gatherings had died away to an ominous silence. The Emperor's advisors, tall beings with flowing robes and faces hidden behind masks of precious metals, stood in rigid formation around the throne. Ambassador Chen of the Human Confederation, the Emperor's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by technology that made it seem to come from everywhere at once. You come before us seeking membership in our great empire. Sarah bowed deeply as protocol demanded. Your Imperial Majesty, I am honored to stand before you. Humanity offers its friendship and its unique gifts to the galaxy, seeking only the chance to grow and learn alongside the great civilizations that have come before us. The Emperor leaned forward, his crystalline features catching the light in sharp, threatening angles. Tell me, Ambassador, what gives your species the right to stand among us? You have existed in space for barely a moment. Your people are violent, unpredictable, and primitive. Why should we allow you to contaminate our perfect order? The question caught Sarah off guard. This was not how the private negotiations had gone. In those meetings, the Emperor had seemed almost curious about humanity, asking detailed questions about their culture and capabilities. Now his tone carried something else entirely: contempt, disgust, and something worse that she couldn't quite identify. Your Majesty, she replied carefully, we believe that diversity strengthens civilization. Humanity may be young, but we have already contributed significantly to galactic knowledge. Our scientists have shared their discoveries freely, and our diplomats have worked tirelessly to build bridges between species that had never communicated before. A ripple of what might have been laughter ran through the assembled aliens, but it held no warmth. The Emperor raised one crystalline hand, and the sound died instantly. Contributions, he repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. You speak of contributions as if you have anything to offer us that we do not already possess in greater measure. Your technology is crude, your culture is chaotic. Your very existence disturbs the natural order that we have spent millennia perfecting. Sarah felt her diplomatic training take over, keeping her voice steady despite the growing pit in her stomach. Respectfully, Your Majesty, we have demonstrated our value through our innovations. The quantum processors we developed have increased computational efficiency by 300%. Our medical advances have eliminated diseases that plagued 17 different species. Surely these achievements speak to our potential as partners in your great empire. The Emperor's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. Partners? You misunderstand your position entirely, little human. We do not seek partners. We seek subjects, and subjects must know their place. The throne room fell into absolute silence, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears as the full implications of those words sank in. This had never been about partnership or equality. The Empire had never intended to treat humanity as anything more than another species to be conquered and controlled. "Your Majesty," she said, choosing her words with infinite care. "If the Empire is not interested in partnership, then perhaps we should discuss other arrangements. Humanity values its independence, but we are certainly willing to negotiate trade agreements and mutual defense pacts that would benefit both our peoples." The Emperor stood slowly, his towering form casting a shadow across the entire lower section of the throne room. When he spoke, his voice carried a finality that chilled Sarah to the bone. "There will be no negotiations. There will be no trade agreements. There will be no mutual anything. Humanity will submit to imperial rule, or humanity will be eliminated. Those are your only choices." Sarah's mind raced. This was exactly the scenario that Earth's government had feared and prepared for. Hidden in her diplomatic pouch was a quantum communicator that could instantly relay a message across the galaxy. But using it here in front of the entire imperial court would be seen as an act of aggression. "Your Majesty," she said, playing for time, "surely we can find a middle ground. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to coexist peacefully. Humanity has no desire for conflict with the Empire." "Peace?" The Emperor's voice rose to a roar that echoed off the crystal walls. "You dare speak to me of peace while your species spreads across the galaxy like a plague? While your chaotic nature threatens the very stability we have built?" He gestured sharply, and suddenly Sarah found herself surrounded by Imperial guards, their energy weapons humming with deadly power. The human delegation behind her moved instinctively closer together, their own hands moving toward their weapons, though they were vastly outnumbered. "I had hoped," the Emperor continued, his voice returning to its normal volume but losing none of its menace, "that this could be resolved quietly, that humanity might see reason and accept its proper place. But I see now that your species is even more arrogant than I anticipated." Sarah's hand moved slowly toward her diplomatic pouch, but she stopped as she saw the guards tense. One wrong move and this would become a bloodbath. But if she didn't warn Earth about what was coming, the consequences would be far worse than her own death. "What exactly are you proposing, Your Majesty?" she asked, though she already feared the answer. The Emperor smiled, an expression that looked wrong on his crystalline features. "I propose an example, a demonstration of what happens to those who refuse the Empire's generous offer of subjugation." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had walked into a trap, and not just any trap. This entire ceremony, the gathering of representatives from across the galaxy, had been planned from the beginning. They intended to make a spectacle of humanity's refusal, to show every other species what happened to those who dared to resist imperial will. As the guards stepped closer, Sarah made her choice. Her hand darted to the communicator, activating it even as the energy weapons powered up around her. In the split second before the first blast fired, she managed to send a single word across the void to Earth. "Run." The execution was broadcast across every inhabited world in the galaxy. President Maria Santos watched the feeds from her secure bunker beneath the Rockies, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the conference table. Around her, the members of Earth's defense council sat in stunned silence as they witnessed Ambassador Chen's final moments played out in horrifying detail on screens. Throughout the galaxy, the Emperor had made it into theater. Sarah and her entire diplomatic team were forced to kneel in the center of the throne room, while representatives from 1,000 worlds watched. The crystalline ruler stood over them, delivering a speech about the price of defiance and the mercy of the Empire. Then, one by one, he had personally executed each member of the human delegation with an energy blade that cauterized as it cut. Sarah had been last. Even in those final moments, she had maintained her dignity, refusing to beg or plead. She had looked directly into the camera drones and spoken words that would echo across human space. "We die free. Remember that when you choose how to live." The transmission ended with the Emperor holding up Sarah's severed head to the assembled aliens, many of whom cheered with sounds that no human throat could make. The message was clear to every species watching. This is what happened to those who refused to kneel to imperial power. "Status report," President Santos said quietly, her voice cutting through the silence in the bunker. Admiral Chen, no relation to the fallen ambassador despite sharing her name, cleared his throat. All our deep space monitoring stations confirm the transmission was sent to every known civilization. The Empire wants everyone to see this. They're making an example of us. What about our colonies? Asked Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the chief scientist on the Defense Council. Communication blackouts across all 6 colony worlds, reported Communications Director James Wright. We have to assume they're under attack or already fallen. The Empire moved fast after the execution. President Santos closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 12 billion human lives pressing down on her shoulders. When she opened them again, her expression had hardened into something that would have made the Emperor pause, had he been there to see it. They think they know us, she said quietly. They think we're just another primitive species that will either submit or be easily crushed. They're about to learn otherwise. She turned to Admiral Chen. What's the status of Project Prometheus? The Admiral's face was grim. All prototypes are functional. We completed the final test 2 weeks ago. The artificial intelligence cores are stable, and the quantum drives are performing beyond specifications. But Maria, we only have 7 ships, 7 against an empire that spans 47 star systems. Numbers don't always tell the whole story, Dr. Harper interjected. Our technology is different from theirs. They've been using the same basic designs for millennia, just refining them. We built everything from scratch in 50 years without any preconceptions about what was possible. President Santos nodded. Show me the tactical analysis. The holographic display in the center of the table flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional map of known space. Red dots marked Imperial territory, a vast network of connected systems that dominated the galaxy's core. Blue dots showed human space, 6 lonely points on the galactic rim that looked pathetically small in comparison. The Empire has overwhelming numerical superiority, Admiral Chen began, pointing to various locations on the map. Conservative estimates put their fleet strength at over 50,000 capital ships, with support vessels numbering in the hundreds of thousands. They have orbital manufacturing facilities around every major world, and can replace losses faster than any single species can inflict them. However, Dr. Harper added, their technology has stagnated. They've been so successful for so long that innovation became unnecessary. Our intelligence reports suggest that their newest ship designs are essentially identical to vessels built 1,000 years ago, just built with better materials. President Santos studied the display. What about their weaknesses? Arrogance, said Wright immediately. They genuinely believe they're invincible. The execution of our delegation proves that. They could have simply destroyed our colonies from orbit without warning, but they wanted to make a show of it. They want other species to fear them, which means they need to be seen as untouchable. Their command structure is also highly centralized, Admiral Chen continued. Everything flows through the Imperial capital on Zephyr Prime. The Emperor makes all major decisions personally, and his regional governors are basically just enforcers of his will. Take out the head and the body might not know what to do. Dr. Harper leaned forward. There's something else. Our xenobiology teams have been analyzing the data we gathered during the diplomatic meetings. The Zephyrians have engineered themselves over millennia to be perfect, but that perfection comes with a price. They're incredibly fragile outside their controlled environments. They can't adapt to unexpected situations the way biological species can. President Santos was quiet for a long moment, her mind working through possibilities that would have seemed like science fiction just hours ago. Finally, she looked up at the assembled council members. They want to make an example of us, she said. Fine, we'll give them an example they'll never forget. But not the one they're expecting. She stood and walked to the display, pointing at the red dot that marked Zephyr Prime. This emperor of theirs just declared war on humanity by murdering our diplomatic team. He thinks he's dealing with a primitive species that will either submit or be easily crushed. He's about to discover that humans don't do either. Admiral Chen shifted uncomfortably. Maria, even with our new ships, a direct assault on the Imperial capital is suicide. Their defenses are legendary. No one has successfully attacked Zephyr Prime in over 1,000 years. No one has ever tried what we're about to try, President Santos replied. Dr. Harper, how long do we need to prepare the Prometheus fleet? The ships are ready now. The AI cores just need final authorization codes, and the crews have been training for months. We could launch within 12 hours. What about the quantum drives? Wright asked. The theoretical models are sound, but we've never tested them at the distances you're talking about. Dr. Harper smiled grimly. The beauty of quantum tunneling is that distance becomes irrelevant once you establish the connection. We could theoretically appear anywhere in the galaxy instantaneously, including places the Empire would never expect an attack to come from. President Santos turned back to the Council. The Empire has ruled through fear for 2,000 years. They've convinced every species in the galaxy that resistance is futile, that their power is absolute. They're about to learn that humans have a very different relationship with impossible odds. She paused, thinking about Sarah Chen's final words. The Emperor wanted to send a message by executing our people. We're going to send a message back. Not to him because he won't be alive to receive it, but to every species watching. We're going to show them that tyrants are not immortal, that empires can fall, and that sometimes the smallest voice can bring down the mightiest throne. Admiral Chen stood slowly. You're talking about assassination. About striking at the very heart of their civilization. I'm talking about justice, President Santos replied firmly. They murdered our diplomatic team under a flag of truce. They declared war on our entire species. In their arrogance, they've given us no choice but to respond in kind. She looked around the table at each council member in turn. I won't order anyone to undertake this mission. It's volunteer only. The crew will be told exactly what they're flying into, and anyone who wants to withdraw can do so without penalty. But I believe that if we don't act now, if we don't show the galaxy that humanity will not be cowed by tyrants, then Sarah Chen and her team will have died for nothing. Dr. Harper was the first to nod. The technology is ready. The plan is sound. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast before they have time to prepare for retaliation. Wright followed. The communications networks are in place. We can coordinate the strike and broadcast the results simultaneously. The whole galaxy will see it happen. Admiral Chen was last, but when he finally nodded, his expression was resolute. I'll lead the mission personally. If we're going to kill an emperor, we should do it right. President Santos felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. The Empire had chosen this path when they decided to make an example of humanity. Now they would learn that humans had their own way of making examples. Then it's decided, she said. Operation Regicide begins now. Captain Marcus Wolf stood before the 7 most advanced warships humanity had ever built, hidden in the asteroid field beyond Pluto, where no Imperial scouts would think to look. The Prometheus-class vessels hung in space like sleeping predators, their black hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. To most sensors, they would appear to be nothing more than irregularly shaped asteroids. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, incorporating technologies that had taken 50 years of desperate innovation to develop. Unlike the ornate ceremonial vessels favored by the Empire, these ships were built for one purpose: to kill things that thought they couldn't be killed. Final systems check, Wolf announced into his comm. Knowing that 6 other captains were conducting identical preparations, the crews had been selected carefully, volunteers all, and every one of them knew this was likely a one-way mission. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, named after the fallen ambassador, reported from the helm. Quantum drive is showing green across all parameters. We can tunnel directly to Zephyr Prime's orbit the moment you give the order. The quantum drive was humanity's greatest breakthrough, developed in secret over the past decade. While other species relied on gradual acceleration through hyperspace, human ships could step outside the normal flow of space-time entirely. The technology was based on principles that the Empire's scientists had declared impossible, which made it the perfect weapon for a species they had dismissed as primitive. Weapon status? Wolf asked. All 7 Singularity torpedoes are armed and ready, reported Weapons Officer David Chang. Each one carries enough antimatter to crack a moon. The AI guidance systems are primed with targeting data for the Imperial Palace complex. Commander Lisa Torres from Engineering added her report. The ship's AI is fully integrated and responsive. Designation Nemesis. She's ready for autonomous operation if needed. The ship's artificial intelligence was another technology that set human vessels apart. While the Empire relied on biological or cybernetic crew members, humans had created true artificial minds capable of thinking and reacting faster than any organic brain. The AI could take over all ship functions if the crew was incapacitated, turning each vessel into a thinking weapon that could fight independently. Wolf nodded grimly. Everything was ready. In a few moments, they would attempt something that military strategists throughout the galaxy would consider absolute madness: A direct assault on the most heavily defended world in known space, with just 7 ships against an empire of thousands. Listen up, he announced to all crews on the private channel. In about 10 minutes, we're going to quantum tunnel directly into Zephyr Prime's orbital space. Intelligence estimates indicate approximately 200 Imperial capital ships in the immediate area, with thousands more stationed throughout the system. The moment we appear, every weapon in the system will be aimed at us. He paused, letting that sink in. Our mission is simple: kill the Emperor. Everything else is secondary. The singularity torpedoes will punch through their shields and fortifications like they're made of paper. But we need to get close enough to use them. That means surviving long enough to reach the palace complex. The private channel crackled with acknowledgments from the other ships. Wolf could hear the tension in his fellow captains' voices, but also the determination. They all knew what the Empire had done to Ambassador Chen and her team. They all knew what would happen to human colonies if this mission failed. ETA to target? Wolf asked. Quantum tunnel can be initiated at your command, Lieutenant Kim replied. Transit time is instantaneous. We'll emerge approximately 50,000 kilometers from Zephyr Prime's surface, well within the orbital defense grid. Wolf took a deep breath. Once he gave this order, there would be no going back. Humanity would have committed itself to a war against an empire that had never known defeat. But the alternative was slavery or extinction, and humans had never been good at accepting either fate quietly. All ships, he announced. This is Wolf. Initiate quantum tunnel on my mark. Target coordinates locked. Remember, we're not here to win a fleet engagement. We're here to cut off the head of the snake. 3, 2, 1 at mark. Reality twisted around the 7 ships as they stepped outside normal space-time. For a brief moment that felt like eternity, they existed in a place between dimensions where the normal rules of physics held no meaning. Then, with a flash of exotic radiation that would confuse Imperial sensors for precious seconds, they emerged into Zephyr Prime's orbit. The sight that greeted them was both magnificent and terrifying. Zephyr Prime was a world of crystal spires and floating cities, its surface glowing with the light of 1 billion inhabitants. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the planet like artificial moons, each one bristling with defensive weapons that could sterilize entire worlds. And between the human ships and their target stood the Imperial home fleet, 200 vessels each larger than anything humanity had ever built. The smallest Imperial cruiser outmassed a human battleship by a factor of 10, and their flagship, the Eternal Glory, was a mobile fortress the size of a small moon. Contacts, Kim announced. Multiple capital ships converging on our position. They've spotted us. Beginning evasive maneuvers, Wolf ordered. All ships execute pattern Delta. Don't give them a clear target. The human vessels scattered in all directions, their superior acceleration and maneuverability allowing them to dance between the lumbering Imperial ships. The enemy had expected many things, but they had not expected an attack that bypassed all their early warning systems and appeared directly in their home system's heart. Incoming fire, Chang announced as the first Imperial energy beams lanced through space. The shots went wide, the enemy gunners still adjusting to the sudden appearance of hostile vessels in their midst. Wolf watched the tactical display as his small fleet weaved through the orbital defenses. The AI nemesis was already calculating firing solutions and plotting the optimal path to their target. On his screen, he could see the Imperial Palace complex rising from Zephyr Prime's surface like a crystal mountain, its spires reaching into the lower atmosphere. All ships begin attack run, Wolf commanded. Target the palace complex. Fire when you have a clear shot. The 7 human vessels dove toward the planet's surface, their quantum drives allowing them to make impossible course corrections that confused the Imperial targeting computers. Behind them, the massive enemy fleet struggled to pursue, their ships too large and unwieldy to match the humans' erratic flight patterns. But the orbital platforms were another matter. These massive weapons installations had been positioned specifically to prevent exactly this kind of assault, and their gunners were among the best in the Empire. Energy beams powerful enough to vaporize asteroids began filling the space around the human ships. The first hit came without warning. The vessel Retribution took a direct strike from a platform's main gun, its shields flaring and failing in seconds. Wolf watched helplessly as the ship broke apart, its crew dying instantly as the hull was torn open by forces that could crack continents. Retribution is down, reported Captain Sarah Cross from the ship Vengeance. 6 ships remaining. Wolf gritted his teeth. They had known this would be costly, but losing a ship so quickly was a blow to their already minimal chances. Still, they were almost within range of their target. "Maintain course," he ordered. "We're committed now." The Imperial Palace complex grew larger on his screens, its crystal walls gleaming in the light of Zephyr Prime's twin suns. Somewhere in those spires, the Emperor was probably watching this attack unfold, perhaps amused by the audacity of these primitive humans who dared to assault his fortress world. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, Chang announced. Wolf smiled grimly. The Emperor was about to discover that humans had a gift for exceeding expectations, especially when someone made the mistake of underestimating them. "All ships," he announced, "prepare to fire." Emperor Kajtar stood on the highest balcony of his crystal palace, watching the small human fleet dance through his orbital defenses with something approaching admiration. The primitive vessels moved like nothing he had ever seen, their pilots executing maneuvers that should have been impossible for ships of their size and design. "Your Imperial Majesty," General Vorthak approached from behind, his four arms gesturing frantically. "You must retreat to the secured chambers immediately. These humans appear to be targeting the palace directly." The Emperor's crystalline features caught the light from the explosions above as another human ship was destroyed by the orbital platforms. The creatures were tenacious, he had to give them that. Most species would have surrendered the moment they saw the size of the Imperial home fleet. "Fascinating," he murmured, watching as the remaining ships continued their impossible approach. "Tell me, General, how many species have ever attempted a direct assault on Zephyr Prime?" "None, Your Majesty. In 2,000 years of Imperial rule, no enemy has been foolish enough to attack the capital directly. And yet, here they are." The Emperor's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "These humans continue to surprise me. First, they refuse our generous offer of subjugation. Then they somehow appear in our most secure system without triggering any early warning sensors. Now they're actually attempting to attack the palace itself." Another explosion lit up the sky as a human vessel exploded under concentrated fire from 3 orbital platforms. The Emperor counted carefully. 5 ships remaining, still diving toward his fortress world with single-minded determination. "Your Majesty, please," General Vorthak insisted. "The humans may be primitive, but their weapons technology appears to be more advanced than our intelligence suggested. We should not take any unnecessary risks." The Emperor waved dismissively. 5 ships, General. 5 small vessels against the combined might of the Imperial home fleet and our orbital defenses. What possible threat could they pose to a palace that has withstood meteor impacts and volcanic eruptions for millennia? On his personal display screen, he could see the tactical situation from the perspective of his fleet commanders. The human ships were definitely targeting the palace complex, but they would never get close enough to do any real damage. The orbital platforms alone had enough firepower to sterilize continents. Besides, the Emperor continued, this attack serves our purposes perfectly. Let every species in the galaxy watch as humanity's desperate gambit fails. Let them see what happens to those who dare to raise their hand against Imperial authority. He gestured toward the communication array built into the balcony's crystal walls. Are we broadcasting this to all Imperial worlds? Yes, Your Majesty. The entire galaxy is watching as these foolish humans demonstrate the futility of resistance. The Emperor smiled. The execution of the human diplomatic team had been effective theater, but this would be even better. An entire species committing suicide in full view of the galaxy would send a message that would keep other primitive civilizations in line for centuries to come. On the tactical display, he watched as another human ship took critical damage and began spinning out of control, but instead of trying to escape or surrender, the vessel's pilot did something unexpected. The ship suddenly accelerated directly toward one of the orbital platforms, its hull glowing white-hot from weapons fire and structural failure. What is it doing? General Vorthak asked, leaning closer to the display. The Emperor's amusement faded as understanding dawned. It's ramming. The pilot is sacrificing his ship to take out that platform. The collision was spectacular. The human vessel, no larger than an Imperial corvette, struck the massive orbital platform at significant fraction of light speed. The platform's shields held for perhaps a microsecond before the kinetic energy overwhelmed them completely. The explosion that followed was visible from the planet's surface, a brief new star that lit up the orbital ring. Impressive, the Emperor admitted. Their pilots appear to have no fear of death. Your Majesty, we should really— Look at this, the Emperor interrupted, pointing at the display. The remaining 4 human ships had used the explosion as cover, diving through the debris field and emerging much closer to the planet's surface. They were now within the orbital defense grid, where the massive platforms couldn't target them without risking damage to the planet itself. Clever, he murmured. They've studied our defenses more carefully than I gave them credit for. The human ships were now skimming through Zephyr Prime's upper atmosphere, using the planet's gravity well to increase their speed, while staying below the engagement envelope of the orbital weapons. Imperial fighters were scrambling to intercept, but the human vessels were moving too fast and too erratically for effective pursuit. How long until they reached the palace? The Emperor asked. General Vorthak consulted his tactical computer. At current speed and trajectory, approximately 3 minutes, Your Majesty. But the palace shields are rated to withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. Even if they somehow manage to attack us, they cannot possibly penetrate our defenses. The Emperor nodded, but something nagged at him. These humans had already done several things that should have been impossible. They had appeared in his system without warning. They had navigation technology that outperformed Imperial sensors, and their pilots flew with a reckless courage that bordered on insanity. What do we know about their weapons? He asked. Very little, Your Majesty. Our intelligence estimates suggest standard kinetic projectiles and energy beams. Nothing that could threaten Imperial armor. They are, after all, a primitive species that has only been in space for 50 years. But as the Emperor watched the 4 remaining ships approach his palace, he began to wonder if perhaps his intelligence services had underestimated these humans in more ways than one. Any species capable of developing faster than light travel in just 50 years clearly had some unusual capabilities. Your Majesty, came a new voice from the communication system. This is Fleet Admiral Senator. The human vessels have somehow jammed our targeting systems. Our fighters cannot lock onto them. The Emperor's expression darkened. Explain. They appear to be using some form of electronic warfare that our computers cannot counter. Each time we acquire a target lock, it immediately breaks. Our pilots are having to rely on visual targeting only. How is that possible? Unknown, Your Majesty. This technology is unlike anything in our databases. The Emperor felt the first stirring of genuine concern. His military had spent centuries perfecting their systems against known threats. But humans were not a known threat. They were supposed to be primitive newcomers who could be easily crushed or controlled. General, he said quietly, perhaps we should consider retreating to the secure chambers after all. But even as he spoke, the Emperor's pride rebelled against the idea. He was the ruler of the galaxy's greatest empire, master of 47 star systems and billions of subjects. He would not be driven from his own palace by a handful of desperate humans. On the display, he could see the 4 human ships beginning their final approach. They were diving directly toward the palace complex now, and he could make out details of their hull design. The vessels were sleek and predatory-looking, unlike the elaborate ceremonial designs favored by Imperial shipwrights. Incoming transmission from the lead human. Vessel, announced the communications officer. Put it through, the Emperor commanded. The face that appeared on his screen was that of a middle-aged human male, his features hard with determination and something else. Grief, the Emperor realized. These humans were not just attacking randomly. They were here for revenge. I am Captain Marcus Wolf of the Terran Defense Fleet, the human said, his voice steady despite the fact that his ship was diving through a storm of defensive fire. You murdered our diplomatic team under a flag of truce. You declared war on our entire species. I'm here to deliver humanity's response. The Emperor leaned forward. Your response appears to consist of throwing away your lives uselessly. 4 ships against an empire. Did you really think this would accomplish anything? Captain Wolf smiled grimly. Your Imperial Majesty, you made one crucial mistake. You assumed we came here to fight your fleet. The Emperor felt a chill run through his crystalline form. What do you mean? We didn't come here to win a battle, Wolf replied. We came here to kill you, and we only need one shot to do it. The transmission cut off, and the Emperor stared at the tactical display as the 4 human ships entered the final phase of their attack run. Suddenly, his magnificent palace felt very much like a trap. Captain Wolf felt his ship shudder as another energy beam grazed their hull, but the nemesis held together. The AI was performing beyond all expectations. calculating micro-corrections faster than any human pilot could react, keeping them alive through a storm of fire that would have destroyed any conventional vessel. Palace shields are at maximum strength, reported Weapons Officer Chang. But the singularity torpedoes should punch right through them. These readings show typical Imperial energy barriers, nothing we haven't planned for. Wolf nodded grimly. The singularity torpedoes were humanity's answer to Imperial superiority in defensive technology. Each weapon contained a microscopic black hole held in a magnetic containment field. Upon impact, the field would collapse, releasing forces that could tear through any known material. Distance to target, he asked. 15 seconds to optimal firing range, Lieutenant Kim reported from the helm. The AI suggests we spread our attack pattern to maximize penetration of their defensive grid. Agreed. Signal the other ships to execute final attack formation. Around them, the 3 remaining human vessels adjusted their courses, each one targeting a different section of the massive palace complex. The Zephyrian structure rose from the planet's surface like a crystal mountain, its spires reaching kilometers into the sky. Somewhere in those towers, the Emperor was learning what it meant to be hunted by humans. Sir? Chang said suddenly, his voice tight with concern. I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the palace structure. They're charging some kind of defensive weapon. Wolf's tactical display updated to show the new threat. The palace itself was lighting up with power signatures that dwarfed anything they had encountered in the orbital battle. Whatever the Zephyrians were preparing, it was clearly designed to deal with exactly this kind of close-range assault. How long until they can fire? Wolf demanded. Unknown, but at the rate those power levels are climbing, maybe 20 seconds. Wolf felt time slowing around him as his mind processed the tactical situation. 20 seconds until the palace could defend itself effectively. 15 seconds until his ships reached optimal firing range. The margin was impossibly thin, but it might be enough. All ships prepare for emergency acceleration, he commanded. We're going to close the distance faster than planned. Sir, that will put us well within the blast radius of our own weapons, Chang warned. I know. But if we don't take that risk, we'll never get close enough to fire at all. Wolf felt the acceleration press him back into his command chair as the Nemesis poured every erg of power into its engines. The other human ships matched his maneuver. All 4 vessels diving toward the palace at velocities that would make escape impossible. On his display, he could see Imperial fighters trying desperately to intercept them. But the human ships were moving too fast now. The Zephyrian pilots simply couldn't match the sheer reckless courage of humans, who had already accepted that they were going to die. 10 seconds to firing range, Kim announced. Palace weapons are almost ready, Chang added. Whatever they're planning to hit us with, it's going to be massive. Wolf could see it now on his screens. The crystal spires of the palace were beginning to glow with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. The Zephyrians had built their capital not just as a seat of government, but as a fortress capable of defending itself against any conceivable attack. But they had never conceived of an attack like this. 5 seconds. Kim called out. Palace weapon is charging its final phase, Chang reported. Sir, I don't think we're going to make it. Wolf smiled grimly. We don't have to make it. We just have to get close enough. All ships fire everything. Maximum spread pattern. 4 singularity torpedoes launched simultaneously from the human vessels, their exotic drives carrying them toward the palace at significant fractions of light speed. The weapons were too fast and too small for the Imperial defensive systems to track effectively, designed specifically to penetrate the kind of massive fortifications that the Empire favored. The palace's defensive weapon fired a split second later, a beam of coherent energy that lit up the night sky like a second sun. The beam struck the lead human ship, the Vengeance, and simply vaporized it. The vessel didn't explode or break apart. It simply ceased to exist, its matter converted to energy in an instant. But the torpedoes were already on their way. Wolf watched on his display as the 4 weapons struck different sections of the palace complex. The first torpedo hit the main spire where the Emperor's throne room was located. The magnetic containment field collapsed on impact, and for a brief moment a microscopic black hole existed in the heart of the Zephyrian fortress. The effect was devastating. The black hole didn't just destroy the matter it touched. It warped space-time itself, creating gravitational shears that tore through the crystal structure like tissue paper. The main spire collapsed in on itself, its quantum-engineered materials unable to withstand forces that existed at the birth of the universe. The second torpedo struck the palace's power generation facility, and the resulting explosion was visible from orbit. The third hit the communications center, silencing the Emperor's voice across the galaxy, just as he was trying to coordinate his empire's response to the attack. The fourth torpedo struck the ceremonial hall where, just days before, the Emperor had executed Ambassador Chen and her team. The irony was not lost on Wolf as he watched the building collapse into rubble. Direct hits on all targets, Chang reported, his voice filled with amazement. The palace complex It's gone, sir. The entire structure is collapsing. Wolf felt a grim satisfaction as he watched 2,000 years of imperial arrogance crumble into dust. But their mission wasn't complete yet. Scan for survivors, he ordered. We need confirmation that the Emperor is dead. Sir, Kim interrupted, we have more immediate problems. The palace's defensive weapon is recharging, and there are Imperial capital ships closing on our position fast. Wolf looked at his tactical display and felt his heart sink. The 3 remaining human ships had expended their primary weapons, and they were now trapped in the gravity well of Zephyr Prime, with dozens of Imperial vessels converging on them. The mission had succeeded, but none of them were going to live to see the results. All ships, he announced calmly. It has been an honor serving with you. Signal Earth that the mission is complete. The Emperor is dead. But even as he prepared for the end, Wolf noticed something strange on his sensors. The Imperial ships that had been pursuing them so aggressively were suddenly slowing, their formations becoming ragged and uncertain. Even the capital ships in orbit seemed to be hesitating. Sir, Chang said slowly, I think something's happening to their command structure. The Imperial ships aren't coordinating anymore. It's like they don't know what to do. Wolf studied the tactical display more carefully. The Zephyrian fleet was indeed acting strangely, their ships milling about without apparent purpose. Then he remembered what Dr. Harper had said about the Empire's centralized command structure. They've lost their Emperor, he realized. Without him, they don't know how to function. As if to confirm his theory, Wolf's communications system crackled to life with transmissions from across the Zephyrian fleet. Ship captains were arguing with each other, demanding orders that would never come. Regional governors were claiming authority they didn't possess. The entire Imperial command structure was falling apart in real time. Sir, Kim said quietly, I'm reading quantum tunnel signatures. Multiple ships are jumping out of the system. Wolf watched in amazement as the Imperial home fleet, the most powerful naval force in the galaxy, simply scattered. Some ships fled to their home systems, others to strategic bases, and still others to locations known only to their individual captains. Within minutes, the orbital space around Zephyr Prime was nearly empty. Well, Wolf said finally, I guess we're going home after all. But as his 3 battered ships began their journey back to human space, Wolf knew that the real war was just beginning. The Empire might be headless, but it was far from dead, and humanity had just made themselves the most wanted species in the galaxy. News of the Emperor's death spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that had served the Empire for millennia. On 1,000 worlds, species that had lived under Imperial rule for centuries watched in shock as the footage played on their screens. The Crystal Palace, symbol of Imperial power for 2,000 years, reduced to smoking rubble in less than a minute. The Emperor, who had seemed as eternal as the stars themselves, killed by a species that most aliens had never even heard of until a week ago. On the trading world of Kepler Station, Ambassador Thies of the Altarian Republic watched the broadcasts with growing excitement. Her people had been vassals of the Empire for 800 years, forced to pay tribute and provide soldiers for imperial wars of conquest. Now, for the first time in generations, she allowed herself to hope. Contact the Assembly immediately, she ordered her aide. Tell them the humans have done the impossible. The Emperor is dead, and the Empire is in chaos. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as subject species began to realize that their chains might finally be broken. The Mordian Collective mobilized their hidden fleets. The Silicon Imperium activated sleeper agents that had been waiting for centuries. The Vegan Commonwealth declared independence and seized Imperial installations throughout their sector, but nowhere was the reaction more intense than on Earth itself. President Santos stood in the same bunker where she had authorized Operation Regicide, but now the atmosphere was electric with triumph rather than grim determination. Around the conference table, The Defense Council members were struggling to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Confirmed kills on all primary targets, Admiral Chen reported, his voice filled with amazement. The palace complex is completely destroyed, and deep space monitoring confirms that the Imperial home fleet has scattered. Captain Wolf and his remaining ships are en route home. What about the Imperial response? Dr. Harper asked. Surely they have contingency plans for something like this. Communications Director Wright shook his head. That's just it, they don't seem to. We're monitoring communications across Imperial space and it's complete chaos. Regional governors are arguing about succession rights. Fleet commanders are demanding contradictory orders from different claimants to the throne, and at least 17 different Imperial princes have declared themselves the rightful heir. President Santos allowed herself a small smile. So the Empire is tearing itself apart from within? It appears so, Wright confirmed. The Zephyrians built their entire governmental system around the absolute authority of a single ruler. Without the Emperor, they have no legal mechanism for determining succession, and no one with the authority to give orders to the entire Empire. Admiral Chen leaned forward. Ma'am, we're also receiving communications from dozens of species throughout Imperial space. They're requesting formal diplomatic contact with humanity. It seems word has spread that we're the ones who killed the Emperor. And our colonies? Santos asked. All 6 colony worlds report that Imperial forces have withdrawn or surrendered, Wright replied. The garrison commanders were apparently unwilling to continue military operations without clear orders from the capital. Dr. Harper was studying data feeds from across the galaxy. Mr. President, I think we need to understand the full implications of what we've done. The Galactic Empire wasn't just a government. It was the stabilizing force that kept hundreds of species from going to war with each other. Without Imperial authority to enforce peace treaties and trade agreements, we may have just triggered the largest interstellar war in galactic history. Santos nodded soberly. She had known this was a possibility. But faced with the choice between slavery and chaos, humanity had chosen chaos. At least in chaos, there was the possibility of freedom. What's our current military status? She asked Admiral Chen. 3 Prometheus-class vessels remain operational, with 4 more nearing completion in the shipyards. The quantum drive technology has proven itself beyond our wildest expectations, and every major power in the galaxy now knows that we can strike anywhere without warning. That makes us both the most feared and most courted species in known space, Wright added. We're receiving everything from alliance proposals to surrender offers to threats of total annihilation. President Santos stood and walked to the holographic display showing galactic political boundaries. The map was changing in real time as species declared independence, formed new alliances, or simply disappeared into the chaos of a collapsing empire. We wanted to join galactic civilization, she said quietly. Instead, we've destroyed it. No, Dr. Harper said firmly. We destroyed a tyranny. What comes next is up to everyone who was living under Imperial rule. We've given them the chance to choose their own destinies for the first time in centuries. As if summoned by her words, Wright's communication console began chiming with incoming messages. Ma'am, we're receiving formal requests for alliance from the Altarian Republic, the Mordian Collective, and something called the Free Worlds Coalition. They're asking for protection against Imperial loyalist forces. And the threats? Santos asked. Several Imperial governors have sworn to avenge the Emperor's death. They're calling for the complete extermination of humanity and offering substantial rewards for the location of our homeworld. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. Let them come. They've seen what 7 of our ships can do. How do they think they'll fare against our entire fleet? But Santos was thinking beyond immediate military concerns. The Empire had maintained peace through fear and superior firepower for 2 millennia. Now that fear was broken, and dozens of species with centuries-old grievances were looking for revenge. The galaxy was about to become a very dangerous place. We need to move quickly, she decided. Send diplomatic missions to every species that's requesting alliance. If we're going to survive what's coming, we need friends. Real friends, not subjects. What about the Imperial loyalists? Wright asked. They made their choice when they murdered our diplomatic team, Santos replied coldly. Any Imperial force that threatens human colonies or our allies will be dealt with accordingly. Dr. Harper brought up a new display showing fleet movements across Imperial space. Ma'am, this is already starting. Look at the Rigel sector. 3 different Imperial governors are fighting for control, and refugee ships are fleeing the combat zones by the thousands. And here, Admiral Chen pointed to another section of the map. The Centauri hegemony is mobilizing their entire fleet. Intelligence suggests they're planning to invade former Imperial territory while the defenders are distracted. Santos felt the weight of galactic civilization settling on her shoulders. Humanity had struck the first blow for freedom, but now they would have to help build whatever came next. The alternative was to watch the galaxy burn in endless wars of succession and revenge. Admiral, I want production of Prometheus-class vessels accelerated. We're going to need every ship we can build. Dr. Harper, begin development of larger vessels capable of extended deep space operations. If we're going to police this chaos, we need the tools to do it. Ma'am, Wright interrupted. Incoming priority transmission from Captain Wolf. The holographic display shifted to show the battle-worn face of the man who had killed an emperor. Behind him, Wolf could see the bridge of his damaged ship, sparks still flying from overloaded systems. Mr. President, Wolf said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. Mission accomplished. The Emperor is dead and the Imperial fleet has scattered, but we've stirred up a hornet's nest. There are already reports of fighting breaking out across former Imperial space. Understood, Captain. Get your people home safely. You've done more than enough, Wolf nodded. One more thing, ma'am. During our escape, we monitored communications from across the Empire. The subject species aren't just celebrating the Emperor's death. They're looking to us for leadership. They see humanity as the force that liberated them, and they expect us to help them stay free. Santos felt the irony of the situation settle over her. Humanity had sought to join galactic civilization as junior partners. Instead, they had accidentally become its reluctant leaders. Thank you, Captain. We'll be ready. As the transmission ended, Santos looked around at her council. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it seems we're no longer just fighting for human survival. We're fighting for the future of galactic civilization itself. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity. 5 years after the death of Emperor Kajtar, the galaxy had been reborn. Ambassador Maria Vega stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station, watching as ships from dozens of species docked at the massive structure. The station orbited a neutral star system, equidistant from the major population centers of what had once been Imperial space. It served as the headquarters of the Galactic Federation, the democratic alliance that had risen from the ashes of the Empire. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see vessels that would have been impossible just years ago. Altarian Republic ships docked alongside former Imperial Navy cruisers whose crews had defected to the Federation. Mordian collective vessels shared maintenance bays with ships from species that had been their enemies for centuries, and threading between them all were the sleek black forms of human Prometheus-class ships, their quantum drives allowing them to appear anywhere in Federation space within minutes of a distress call. The morning session will begin in 10 minutes, Ambassador, her aide informed her. Today's agenda includes the application for membership from the Zephyrian Democratic Union. Vega nodded, still amazed by how much had changed. The Zephyrians, the species that had once ruled the galaxy with crystal fists, were now themselves seeking protection from Imperial loyalist forces. Their homeworld had been devastated in a civil war between those who wanted to rebuild their civilization democratically and those who sought to restore the old empire under a new emperor. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity, which had once been dismissed as too primitive for galactic civilization, now served as the guarantor of peace for hundreds of worlds. The quantum drive technology that had allowed 7 human ships to kill an emperor had proven equally effective at enforcing ceasefires and protecting refugees. Any word from the Outer Rim? Vega asked. Captain Singh reports that the Liberation Fleet has successfully evacuated the civilian population from the Proxima colony before Imperial remnant forces could arrive. No casualties on our side, and the refugees are being relocated to Federation worlds. Vega smiled. The Liberation Fleet was one of humanity's proudest achievements, a joint force of human ships and allied vessels dedicated to rescuing populations threatened by the ongoing Imperial civil wars. In 5 years, they had saved over 1 billion beings from slavery, genocide, or simple starvation as entire star systems collapsed into chaos. She made her way to the Federation Council chambers, a vast amphitheater where representatives from 87 different species gathered to debate the future of galactic civilization. As she entered, Vega was struck once again by the sight of former enemies sitting side by side, working together to solve problems that had seemed impossible under Imperial rule. "The session will come to order," announced Council President This, the Altarian who had been elected to lead the Federation just 2 years earlier. "Today we consider the application for membership from the Zephyrian Democratic Union." Vega took her seat in the human delegation section, flanked by representatives from Earth's 6 colony worlds and 3 new settlements that had been established in former Imperial territory. Humanity now controlled 12 star systems directly and maintained defensive treaties with 43 others. The Zephyrian delegate approached the central podium, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that conveyed deep emotion. This was Printar, a former Imperial general who had led the rebellion against his own government after witnessing the atrocities committed by loyalist forces. "Honored representatives," Printar began, his voice carefully modulated to be understandable to the dozens of different auditory systems in the chamber. "I come before you not as a conqueror but as a petitioner. My people seek to atone for 2 millennia of oppression by joining the community of free worlds." There was a murmur through the chamber. Many species still harbored deep resentment against the Zephyrians, and Printar's presence here was controversial even among Federation supporters. The Zephyrian Democratic Union controls 7 star systems and has a population of approximately 2 billion citizens. Printar continued, "We offer our industrial capacity, our scientific knowledge, and our commitment to the principles of freedom and equality that define the Federation." Delegate Corthan of the Vegan Commonwealth stood to address the assembly. "With respect to our Zephyrian friend, words are easy to speak. How can we trust a species that enslaved half the galaxy for 20 centuries? Because they're not the same species anymore," Vega said, rising from her seat. "The Zephyrians who rule today are not the ones who murdered our diplomatic team 5 years ago. They've fought a bitter civil war to overthrow their own government and establish democratic institutions. They deserve the same chance at redemption that we would want for ourselves." "Easy words from the humans," called out another delegate. "You never suffered under Imperial rule the way we did." Vega felt her temper flare but kept her voice steady. "You're right. We never suffered under Imperial rule because we refused to accept it. When the Empire demanded our submission, we chose to fight instead. When they murdered our people, we struck back. But we didn't do it for revenge. We did it because every being in the galaxy deserves the right to choose their own destiny." She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds. "5 years ago, many of you were enemies. The Altarians and the Mordians had been at war for 3 centuries. The Vegan Commonwealth and the Silicon Imperium couldn't even communicate without Imperial translators. Now you work together, not because we forced you to, but because you chose to." President Thies called for order as murmurs spread through the chamber. "The human delegate makes a valid point. The Federation was founded on the principle that past grievances should not prevent future cooperation. But can we trust them?" asked Delegate Xeris of the Procyon Alliance. "The Zephyrians still possess advanced military technology. What if this is simply another attempt to achieve dominance through different means?" Printar's crystalline features shifted into what Vega had learned to recognize as profound sadness. "I cannot blame you for your suspicions. My species has given you every reason to distrust us. But I can tell you this. The Zephyrian Democratic Union has voluntarily dismantled our weapons of mass destruction. We have opened our worlds to Federation inspectors. We have paid reparations to every species that requested them." He gestured toward the human delegation. "More importantly, we have learned from the example set by humanity. When faced with a choice between domination and cooperation, we choose cooperation. When faced with a choice between fear and hope, we choose hope." The debate continued for hours, with delegates raising concerns about Zephyrian motives, their military capabilities, and their commitment to democratic principles. But gradually Vega could see the mood of the chamber shifting. The Federation had been built on the idea that former enemies could become allies, and the Zephyrians had proven their commitment through 5 years of consistent action. When the vote was finally called, the result was overwhelming. 71 species voted in favor of Zephyrian membership, with only 16 opposed. The galaxy's former masters would now take their place as equals in the community of free worlds. As the session ended, Vega found herself approached by Printar, who moved with the flowing grace characteristic of his species. Ambassador Vega, he said, I wanted to thank you personally for your support. I know it was not easy to speak in favor of a species that killed your people. Vega studied the former Imperial general. My people died to give others the chance to choose freedom. If we denied that chance to the Zephyrians simply because of their past, we would dishonor their sacrifice. Your species continues to amaze me, Printar said. In 5 years, you have transformed from unknown primitives to the moral conscience of the galaxy. How do you do it? Vega smiled. We remember that we're all just trying to find our way among the stars. The only difference between humans and any other species is that we refuse to accept that some are born to rule, while others are born to serve. As she watched Printar leave to join the other new Federation members, Vega reflected on how much had changed since Ambassador Chen had walked into the Imperial throne room with hopes of peaceful coexistence. That dream had died with Sarah and her team, but something better had taken its place. The galaxy was no longer united under the rule of a single empire. Instead, it was united by the choice of its inhabitants to work together despite their differences. It was messier, louder, and far more complicated than Imperial rule had been. But it was also free. Through the chamber's windows, Vega could see the stars that humanity had dreamed of reaching for centuries. Now those stars belonged not to any empire or species, but to all beings who chose to reach for them together. Ambassador Sarah Chen would have been proud.